when I wake up in the morning and, I look down at my fiance, the girl that I fell in love with, and she's looking back at me, and I can see the smile on her face, and I can see the love in her eyes and the excitement she has to see me. And to not feel anything back is just horrific. I don't feel anything. I don't feel that love. I don't feel emotions. I don't feel that excitement. I have nothing but just blunted emotions. And how is that fair to her? And I ask myself that every single day. And this isn't a hyperbole either. This is real. And that's just 1/10 of the devastation that post finasteride syndrome causes. Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Mark Millick. I'm 29 years old, and I currently suffer with post finasteride syndrome. So really, the purpose behind this video is to, number one, hopefully build awareness for what post finasteride syndrome is, because it's not really well known by the general public. It's also not even recognized as a real medical disorder by the medical community. We're hoping to change that here at some point. But it really is a debilitating issue that really affects thousands of men worldwide. And it's life-altering, and in some cases, it's even life-ruining. So what I really want to do is build awareness for this, explain what post finasteride syndrome is. And number two, I want to hopefully inspire other people to step up and start talking about this issue because, unfortunately, it is very stigmatized. This medication's been around for, 30 years, and there have been people who've been suffering with these symptoms for, in some cases, 20 plus years. So I think as a general community of people who deal with this, we've been silent up to this point. And again, I want to hopefully inspire people to step up and talk about this because, the only way we're going to find a cure for this is by coming together and discussing our experiences. So again, hope that helps people. And before I jump into my personal story, I want to talk about obviously what finasteride is and what post finasteride syndrome is. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about what finasteride is because the fact is very few people have even heard of this drug. This is a pharmaceutical, right? It's also known as Propecia. Maybe somebody's heard of that. It's basically a hair loss medication that's been on the market since I believe 1996. That's when it was approved by the FDA. Been prescribed millions of times, from my understanding, worldwide. It brings in a lot of money. I think the revenue over the past 30 years has been like $5.4 billion. And look, this is where I want to be objective about this video. The fact is, most people tolerate finasteride well. And that's where I want to hopefully crush this myth about post finasteride syndrome because so many people do tolerate it, they don't want to believe that these symptoms or this disease even really exists. But finasteride is what is known as a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, or 5-AR. So 5-AR is an enzyme. So somebody who's predisposed to male pattern baldness, what happens is that you have testosterone in the human body that converts into dihydrotestosterone via the 5-AR. Dihydrotestosterone, basically, when you have male pattern baldness, it goes to the hair follicles, causes those hair follicles to miniaturize, and then to eventually fall out. That's what causes the baldness, right? So what finasteride does is it inhibits that conversion by up to, I think, 70% of dihydrotestosterone. So it's a very naturally occurring process in the human body. You're essentially putting somewhat of a stop to that process. Now, people who take this medication typically are prescribed one milligram, 7 days a week, right? So every single day. Some people take dosages of, I was taking 1 milligram 3 times a week. When it comes to the symptoms, the most common symptoms that people experience are going to be sexual symptoms or potentially like some mood symptoms, right? So sexually, you could experience erectile dysfunction, maybe low libido, testicular pain, things like that. When it comes to the mood issues, you could experience depression, anxiety. But the idea is that once you come off the medication, those symptoms eventually go away. And for most, that's the case. What post finasteride syndrome is that once you come off the medication, those symptoms continue to persist indefinitely. And in some cases, they're permanent for people. But it doesn't just stop there. It doesn't just stop with the sexual issues and maybe some of the mood issues, right? There's sort of 3 domains in terms of symptoms to post finasteride syndrome. You have neurological, you have physical, and then you have sexual, right? And within each of those domains, you have just a myriad of different symptoms. And these symptoms can be so unbelievably debilitating. They have really ruined people's lives over the years. And that's not a hyperbole. This is a real thing. So, I do want to talk about that and talk about my experience and really how this has just ultimately affected me. So look, before I jump into that, I do also want to talk about sort of this common narrative about post finasteride syndrome, because you can read a lot of articles online about how this is just a psychosomatic disease, right? This is something delusional that's happening. That could not be further from the truth. And look, as somebody who did his research on it, I was somebody that didn't believe that post finasteride syndrome existed. There was no really empirical evidence for it. Everything that you read was all anecdotal. And the belief is that, again, this is all psychosomatic. And when you have somebody who does deal with this, go to multiple different doctors, and to be told that this is all in your head, I mean, it's unbelievably just discouraging, right? You lose any and all hope you have to hopefully overcome this one day and finding a cure. And look, I know the other belief too is that people who are dealing with this aren't dealing with these symptoms because of the drug. They're dealing with it because of poor lifestyle choices, right? I always hear that, people who have post finasteride syndrome are really just dealing with low testosterone levels because they don't work out enough. They don't take care of themselves. They don't diet well. They're just, they're people that don't have any ambition in life, and really that could not be further from the truth, And to talk about myself here, to be a little bit open, because again, one of the purposes of this video is to come out and talk about this and to hopefully reduce that stigma. But the fact is, I was very successful in my life. I had everything going for me. I was very proud to be where I was. But look, I graduated from college back in 2017, so I am college educated. I got a degree in safety management and criminal justice. I work in the construction industry right now. Really a fast-paced field, making very decent money. I've done very well for myself financially over the past, 6 years that I've been in this industry. I've worked on some very high-profile projects. Some clients I've worked for have included Microsoft, Procter & Gamble, the FBI, Disney World. I worked at the DFW airport down in Dallas, Texas. I worked at the Salt Lake City, Utah airport. I worked on data centers. I worked in, Virginia. I worked in West Virginia. I've had a very, very fast-paced career over the past, 6 years, and it's been awesome. In my particular industry too, I need to be at the top of my game mentally, because what I do is I interact with people, I talk to people, I sell safety, I do presentations, I do orientations, I do trainings, so very important for me to be at the top of my game with what I do. I served in the military for 6 years. I was in the Army National Guard from 2014 until 2020. I ETS as a non-commissioned officer. Had a pretty good military career. I wasn't deployed, but yeah, I met some incredible people in the military, and I'm proud to have, to have served. When I was 26 years old, I bought my first house. I bought a duplex, and I did the whole house hacking thing. And basically what that means is I lived in one unit and then rented out the other unit and used that rent money to pay for the mortgage. So I was setting myself up, very well financially. Started a business at 27 years old with a colleague of mine. Him and I have a real estate business where we currently have 3 cash flowing properties, in the business. Been into fitness for my entire life. Since I was 14, I got into bodybuilding. I was featured on bodybuilding.com in an article. I have my own YouTube channel, Mark Millick Fitness. You can look that up. I have my own bodybuilding Facebook page. So look, the point of all this isn't to brag. It's to show people that I had everything going for me in life. I had set myself up for success. I had set myself up, financially. I have an amazing fiance right now who is very supportive over this issue, but I know this affects her as well. And that's one of the things that makes this so unbelievably difficult. But I had everything going for me. I had no prior health issues. I had no prior mental health issues. I was really, almost, without sounding arrogant, the epitome of success in some sense. I'd achieved everything that I wanted to achieve in life up to this point. And then this medication changed all that. So look, I know the big question here is, what are my symptoms and what is life like with post finasteride syndrome, and what does my day-to-day life look like? And look, this is so hard to demonstrate. And this is where it's almost referenced as the silent disease, right? Because it's so hard to demonstrate what you're going through internally. This isn't just, again, psychosomatic. There are some ways to demonstrate this physically for some people who have gone through changes. But even then, doctors still don't even want to address those physical changes as being things caused by finasteride. So look, I'm going to do my best to articulate this in a way that might be understandable for somebody who doesn't deal with post finasteride syndrome, but it's very, very difficult to do. So please bear with me here and just try to understand. Look, I guess I'll start with this, right? So, neurologically, I have, really intense brain fog and really severe anhedonia. And I guess, when I wake up in the morning and, I look down at my fiance, the girl that I fell in love with, and she's looking back at me, and I can see the smile on her face, and I can see the love in her eyes and the excitement she has to see me. And to not feel anything back is just horrific. I don't feel anything. I don't feel that love. I don't feel emotions. I don't feel that excitement. I have nothing but just blunted emotions. And how is that fair to her? And I ask myself that every single day. And then I have to continue acting like the same person that she fell in love with, because I've completely forgotten. I'm going through, it's an act at this point in time. And I got to remember again who that person was. Because this medication has taken all that from me. It's taken my personality. It's taken my wittiness. It's taken my sense of humor. It's taken my intelligence. And really, it's just about, I just go through the motions of day-to-day life. I don't feel anything. I don't feel any excitement. If anything, I just dread having to do this for another day. And it's like that every single day when I wake up. This is really just more about survival. That's what it feels like. I'm in survival mode at this point, at all times. And it changed just like that in a matter of a day. I just woke up one morning and everything, there was this massive cognitive shift. And that's not a hyperbole, right? This is a real thing that's happening. But you experience things like that, and then you think about the brain fog that I deal with, right? I can't retain information the way I used to. I have a tough time learning new things. I have a tough time even speaking half the time, and relaying information that I need to relay to people, and interacting with people, and going into a social situation at work, or going into a meeting, and sitting there in my head and just feeling like I'm just this completely, dysfunctional person, right? It's very isolating. It's extremely isolating. And you can't explain this to people. They're not going to understand. You can tell somebody, that you love them, and logically you love them, but to not feel that love, I mean, this is what we call chemical castration, really. I have severe insomnia. I sleep for maybe 2 hours a night at the absolute most. That's not an exaggeration either. I'll go to bed and I'll sleep for maybe an hour, and I'll wake up and I'll lay there for the rest of the night. And even when I do sleep, it's not quality sleep. And then I wake up the next morning and I don't feel tired. I can't go back to sleep. I don't feel tired at all. I just feel my body feels exhausted though. And it feels like my body is almost eating itself in some weird way. My joints are always clicking. My joints hurt. I feel muscle pain. I feel muscle cramps. I feel muscle twitching that just plagues my entire body. I feel brain zaps, which is a really frightening one for somebody that hasn't experienced that. It's literally like being shocked in the back of the head. Can't tell you what that's from. When I don't experience anhedonia, I have severe anxiety. I have anxiety about going to work. I have anxiety about going into social situations. I can't demonstrate the same personality that I once had. And that loss of self, there's sort of a coping process you have to go through with that too. Because you know who you were, and you know how you felt, right? And I guess it's almost like your personality is based on your emotions in some sense. And so when you don't feel those emotions, you forget how to act. I guess the best way I can describe it. I had really bad speech issues very early on. I had developed a really bad stutter mixed with like slurred speech, which I still kind of deal with to this day. It's been a little bit, it's actually been a lot better probably over the past 3 or 4 months. So that's made some improvements, thank God, but really nothing else has improved, at least neurologically. So physically, and this is where it gets tough, because I know you can look at me, you can objectively say, I look fit, I look like I'm in shape, that's fine, my face looks fine. But I'm not. I know, everything, there's so many things that are just going on in my body that, again, I can't demonstrate. But physically, I lost muscle. I lost about 15 to 20 pounds within the first month of coming off finasteride. I experienced the so-called dreaded crash. My body lost all this weight, and I couldn't even explain. I mean, there was no rhyme or reason. And even then, I didn't want to attribute it to finasteride because it just didn't seem possible. And my body composition started to change. My muscles got super soft, like they lack density now, and I still deal with this to this day. And then one of the biggest things, and this is going to seem unbelievable, but my skin is unbelievably stretchy at this point. And it wasn't like this before. It's like that around my arms. It's like that around my neck. It wasn't like that before. I've talked to so many doctors about this, and they want to, again, attribute this to what they say is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. That's a genetics disease that you inherit. It's very rare, but they want to say it's that, and they want to say I've always had these skin issues. My skin's always been this stretchy, but I know for a fact it hasn't been. As somebody who's been a bodybuilder for 15 years of his life, I know my body, I know my body composition, I know what I look like, and I've seen these changes. But I continue to be gaslighted by the medical community and told this is all in my head. So even when you have something physical that you can demonstrate, like my skin, they still don't believe me. They still don't believe me. Then we wonder why we have suicides, from Post Finasteride Syndrome. It's because there's no hope. There's no belief with any of this. Weight loss. I've had, again, I had the weight loss. I already mentioned that. No sweating, right? So I've lost the ability to really sweat. I don't have any, I can sit in the sauna for 20 minutes and not even break a sweat. My face doesn't get oily anymore. My hair doesn't get oily. Gym pumps. I mean, I can go to the gym and work out. I I have a tough time getting a pump. And I guess going back real quick to the weight loss, I've been able to put that weight back on over the past 3 months because of medical intervention. I've used something called HCG to help treat, some low testosterone issues that I had. And please don't think this is just low testosterone either. There's so much more going on here. That helped me put on a little bit of my muscle and get back up to about 200 pounds. Hasn't done anything for my skin. Hasn't done anything for the muscle softness. It's really helped put the weight back on and increase my strength. But libido issues, right? So I've really only sexually, I've really just been, I've been spared from that for the most part. I do have lower libido issues, but again, for the most part, I don't deal with anything sexually. I haven't had any erectile dysfunction or anything like that. And as I'm talking now, I'm getting stuck into this state of being perpetually zoned out. And maybe that's a way to kind of explain what this feels like, because as I'm talking, I'm losing track of my thoughts. I'm getting distracted by nothing, right? But I just have such a tough time focusing. No, it's not just ADHD or something like that, though. It wasn't like this before. But I'm trying to talk, I'm trying to articulate myself, and it's tough to get out what I want to say. Look, you can't demonstrate some of these things. You can't demonstrate what it's like to lose the feeling of love, to not experience, any emotions anymore. To be completely different on the inside, to have your personality completely robbed. You can't explain that to somebody, but it's happening. And even when you can demonstrate things like my skin, and people still don't want to believe that finasteride causes this, what do you say? What hope are you left with? And to be somebody who was really into personal development, who had passions, who had a drive, and who just was excited about life. I was very much into reading. I love reading about psychology. I love reading about really just humanity and understanding people. I love reading books on leadership. I was very much into the personal development side of things, and I think that's actually a common theme that I've actually seen with people who are dealing with post finasteride syndrome. You can talk to some of these people, and they were really just good-hearted, young, driven, ambitious men. They really were. They were ready to take on the world. They were ready for new challenges. And to have all that kind of robbed from you, taken away from you because of this medication, and then to not be believed by doctors. I know I keep saying that, but I can't stress that enough. I mean, it leaves you with no hope. So look, let me jump into my story here and kind of talk about, how I got the medication and my experience with, going through taking it and how I ended up ultimately developing, post finasteride syndrome. I started noticing some really minor hair thinning probably in July of 2020. And, it wasn't a huge deal to me, but it's something I just wanted to address. So didn't want to go to a dermatologist about it. I went to the HIMSS website. So you have really, I think primarily 3 different organizations or websites right now that are giving away really finasteride like it's candy, right? You got HIMSS, you got, I think, Keeps, and then you got Romans. And they're really marketing aggressively towards young men, especially when it comes to erectile dysfunction issues, hair loss, depression, anxiety. They'll basically sell you, almost any pharmaceutical you can think of in regards to those things. But no, it was a really simple process. All I had to do was go to the HIMSS website. I had to take a few pictures of my scalp and answer a quick questionnaire. And then probably in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks, I had the medication at my doorstep. I didn't have a consultation with the doctor. I think I had a waiver I had to sign that said, hey, here are the potential symptoms of finasteride. And I had to, check mark a box, and that was it. There was no other process I had to go through. So I got the medication, and, I'm somebody who's very analytical. So I didn't just decide to pop this, this pill day one. I wanted to do some research about it first. And I did, and I researched really extensively for about 3 months. I looked up different reviews online. I was looking up the clinical trials that had been completed by Merck. I was looking up the results of those. I was looking up different YouTube videos to see what people had to say about it. I was looking at videos that doctors had put out about finasteride. And, you hear about some of the whispers of post finasteride syndrome, or what really are just these persistent side effects that people, deal with after coming off the medication. Again, primarily being, sexual issues, and then maybe some depression or, things like that. But I wasn't really, I wasn't frightened by that because there was no empirical evidence that supported that. I'm not somebody who just believes in anecdotal evidence. You can tell me you had an experience, and I want to validate that experience for you, but that's not evidence that this may have happened. So, I wasn't really concerned about it. And as a matter of fact, I actually read a lot of comments from people saying, their only regret with finasteride was not taking it sooner. They were driven away by the fear mongering, as they put it, right? And they were afraid to take the medication because they were afraid of these potential side effects. And they felt like they had lost a lot of ground because they took it 3 years later, and it basically stopped their hair loss at that point. And again, their biggest regret was, I just wish I had taken it sooner and not given into this fear mongering. So I kind of used, I guess there was this confirmation bias that kind of kicked in for me. I didn't want to hear about the negative side of things. I wanted to hear about the positive reviews that people were having. And that was really the common theme that I saw. People were just saying, I just regret not taking it sooner. So really, I'd done extensive research. I felt like I'd done my due diligence. And, when it came time in January, it was January 19th, 2021, I took the medication. I was very, very comfortable with it, and this is where everybody wants to say that anybody that experiences side effects, it's just the nocebo effect. And that couldn't be further from the truth because, again, I was comfortable taking this medication. I mean, the day that I took it, I felt better after taking it. I popped it like it was just a piece of candy, really. And again, I was taking a 1 milligram dose 3 times a week. My plan was to take it and to not think about it again. I was going to move on with my life and know that I was doing something for this, really what was a minor issue before. Within the first week or two, in hindsight, I was experiencing symptoms. I was having kind of speech difficulties and brain fog. And I didn't think much of it. I thought maybe it was just some anxiety that I was dealing with, and that was causing me to have a tough time articulating my thoughts, and that's why I was thinking in kind of a more muddied manner. But I definitely did notice in hindsight. And then I started a new job in March of 2021. And, that's when things started to pick up some speed a little bit in terms of the symptoms. And I'd say intermittently between March and July, I was experiencing some of this brain fog. I was experiencing, I guess, a little bit of anhedonia, nothing that was too significant. And the speech issues were pretty intense. I mean, they were intermittent. They would occur maybe once or twice a week, and they started to pick up more from, once or twice a week to 3 or 4 times a week until eventually it became persistent. But I definitely noticed that there was some type of transition going on. Still didn't attribute it to finasteride by any means. I had no reason to believe that finasteride was causing this stuff. And then in July of 2021, 6 months after I started taking the medication, I woke up and there was this massive cognitive shift. And it felt like I'd been lobotomized when I woke up that morning. And I remember it so perfectly because I woke up and I just felt like I'd been hit by a train and I couldn't think clearly. And I felt very disconnected from everything around me, right? And I went into work and I had to give a presentation. And I remember doing this presentation, and it was an orientation. It was an onboarding orientation, which at this point I had done, probably 1,000 times in my career. And information that I had been teaching for, 6 years at this point, I just completely forgot. Trainings on confined space work or fall protection or silica dust exposure, very common, things within the construction health and safety industry. I just completely forgot. And I didn't know what was going on, but I guess I would almost compare it to something like dementia, right? It was really weird. And I couldn't get my words out. My mouth had become really numb. And it was almost like, I can't even explain how, what you want to say, but you can't even transition your words smoothly. I guess slurred speech, that's what it was. It was slurred speech. It was a slurred speech combined with like a stutter. And, I was thinking to myself, I'm just having a bad day, right? Maybe I didn't sleep well last night. You want to attribute it to really something else. And again, you never assume it's the medication. Well, this continued for the next 3 or 4 days. And then I realized by the 4th day, hey, something serious is going on here. I need to go to the doctor. So I scheduled an appointment with a neurologist. And between August of 2021 and in January of 2022, I went to 3 different neurologists. I had 2 MRIs done, an MRA, an EEG, 2 EMGs, and I think that's everything, and a bunch of blood work as well. Everything came back clear, and doctors all wanted to chalk this up to being something psychosomatic. And I almost couldn't blame them at this point, because it's like, you guys aren't finding anything, but I know something is going on in my brain. There's some type of cognitive shift, and it was so significant back in July, and it's been like that really ever since. And so the symptoms continued to get worse, and I continued taking finasteride. Again, not even suspecting that it was the medication. As a matter of fact, one neurologist I went to even, saw on my medical paperwork that I was taking finasteride, because I was very intentional about putting that on every single medical document that I received. And he said, hey, what are you taking this for? I said, hair loss. And he said, wow, I've been taking that for years. He's like, it's done nothing but great things for me. So he's like, I'm glad to hear you're taking it. So again, you hear things like that, and it just kind of reaffirms this idea that that finasteride could not be the cause of any of this. So it was finally in April of 2022 when I just got so fed up and I sat down, and I really done this already several times, and I was looking up some information about finasteride, right? Because, that was the only outlier in my life, that could have potentially have been causing that. But that's the thing, when you do this research, you don't find much information about neurological issues or physical issues that people have. You hear about the sexual issues, and you also read all these articles about how, PFS is just this delusional disorder. So you don't put too much stock into it. But I really sat down the one day and I started researching pretty in depth, about finasteride. And that's when I found all these things about Post Finasteride Syndrome. And I found the Propecia Help forums, and I found the Reddit page. And I read these stories about people who have been suffering just so immensely for, in some cases, again, 20 plus years. And it was scary. It was really scary. And even then, I just thought this, there's no way finasteride can cause this, right? Because I'm reading about these physical issues that I didn't have. I didn't have this loose skin. I didn't have this muscle wastage. I didn't have this weight loss. I didn't have, this lack of sweating. That to me just seemed, it was so foreign. It was so alien. It just didn't seem like it was possible. So even then, I didn't believe in the stories, right? But I thought to myself, this is the only outlier in my life that has been causing me to have these unbelievably debilitating issues, and in that time frame too, that's when the anhedonia really started to kick in. It was in July of 2021. So it was really what I was experiencing, I guess at the time, were on the drug symptoms. And the hope was that, okay, I'm going to come off this and everything's going to go back to normal. My life is going to go back to normal. My speech issues are going to correct themselves. My brain fog is going to dissipate. And they didn't. And I had read about the so-called crash that some people experience when coming off the medication. And I did crash. I can't tell you there was a certain distinct time when it happened, but it was probably within a month or two of coming off the medication. It was, a month after I came off, I lost all that weight. And then I started to notice that my skin became super loose and my muscles became soft and I couldn't get a pump in the gym and my strength started to go. And the brain zaps continued, and the brain fog was so intense, and the anhedonia and all these neurological issues just continued to persist. But then now it was paired with these physical issues. And it was so scary. It was unbelievably frightening. And I kept going to more doctors trying to figure this out. And I kept bringing up Post Finasteride Syndrome. And I got gaslighted so much. Every doctor said, no, finasteride cannot cause this. That's ridiculous. That's an unbelievable claim. And doctors got aggressive with me about this. There's one doctor in particular who said, you need to quit saying this is finasteride. Finasteride didn't cause this for you. So what am I supposed to think? What hope am I supposed to have when you can't find any biological markers in my body that would indicate there's something going on? And I know you can look at me and you can say you're fit, you're fine. And I can show you my skin like I did with so many doctors, and they can say, well, that's just Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It's not. I didn't have these issues before. I've been gaslighted so much over the past 2 years. And really, I'm just done with it. I'm sick and tired of it. And for this community, people who are dealing with Post Finasteride Syndrome, we can't just sit around anymore and let this happen to us. This is a complete injustice, and people should be pissed off about this because there have been people who have committed suicide over this stuff. There have been people who have had their lives absolutely destroyed. And while I don't like to take on that particular narrative myself, I can almost objectively say my life has been ruined in several different ways. Doctors need to start taking their patients more seriously. They really do. If somebody comes to you and they say they're dealing with Post Finasteride Syndrome, take them seriously. Listen to them. I know that's nothing we can do right now, but continue building awareness for this. We need to fund research. Right now, there's no research that's really being funded outside of what the PFS network is currently doing. And I'll talk about the PFS network more in a few minutes. But we need people to believe us, So look, I want to be transparent here, like I said, and I want to be objective, and I don't want to be biased towards this because, again, the fact is there are a lot of people who take finasteride, and people take it apparently safely. It's well tolerated for most. So the chances of somebody developing Post Finasteride Syndrome are apparently relatively rare. I think the numbers are more than we give credit for, but people take this drug safely all the time. So again, this isn't fear-mongering. I'm not trying to sell a particular agenda here. I have no reason to do this. I'm a very private person. I don't want to come out and talk about this, but I feel the need to because very few people are stepping up and discussing this. And it's not fair to have all this suppressed, to pretend like this is a psychosomatic disorder and to basically brush all these things under the rug, for doctors to do and for the pharmaceutical companies to do is a complete injustice. And anybody that's dealing with this needs to step up. We need to step up as a community and we need to talk about this. You should be pissed off to have your life completely taken away from you for just taking a handful of pills in some cases is completely unfair. Doctors, please take your patients seriously. Look into this. We need to fund research into this. Start talking to your colleagues about this. But don't tell a patient this is all in your head. So look, people want to say that, Post Finasteride Syndrome doesn't kill either. I mean, let's talk about suicide. There have been approximately 97 documented deaths worldwide, according to the PFS Foundation, of people who have taken their lives, from suicide because of Post Finasteride Syndrome. And you can ask yourself, why do people take their lives? Why do they commit suicide over Post Finasteride Syndrome? Well, look, number one, some of these symptoms can be so unbelievably debilitating. There are people who are literally bedbound, who can't take care of themselves, who can't get out of bed, who can't operate the way they used to, all because of this medication. And number two, you have doctors who continuously gaslight their patients, who want to attribute all this to nothing more than just depression or anxiety or some type of psychosomatic issue. When you're somebody that goes into a doctor, like myself, who's gone to approximately 8 different doctors over the past 2 years, and you tell them your symptoms, and you show them your skin like I have, and they just want to say this is all in your head, what do? What hope are you left with at that point? There's no research being done, no major research being done into this issue right now. No research outside of the PFS community, at least. Doctors don't want to take their patients seriously, and that's why, and then you wonder why, the suicide rate is so high for people in this community. So look, I'm going to name a few people here. You got Mark Turner. Mark Turner was 37 years old and just took his life, just last April of 2022. So just 10 months ago. I didn't know Mark Turner personally, but apparently he was a wonderful man. He was passionate about life. He was passionate about sports. He was just great. He only took the medication for, I think, a month and a half as well. I think it was between October of 2020 and I think maybe December of 2020. And a year and a half later, his symptoms had become so debilitating that he felt the need to take his life. That's tragic. And you can read his suicide note online. He had over, I believe, 40 symptoms when it was all said and done. And he even writes in the suicide note about how, he could never comprehend suicide before all this. There's sort of this biological mechanism we have that drives us to stay alive. And he was able to override that because he was in so much pain. You have John Pfaff, who was a father of 2, who took his life back in 2013. I believe he was 42 years old. From my understanding, he'd been off the medication for about 2 years, but continued to deal with debilitating depression. He jumped in front of a train. His wife, Kelly Pfaff, is still currently fighting for justice for his death. She's doing everything she can. I don't know. From my understanding, there hasn't been much success with it, but she's fighting. You have Stephen Kenny, who was 42 years old. He was a police officer. From my understanding, he'd been dealing with the persistent side effects for 2 to 3 years when he finally just ended his life. He hung himself. You have Professor Daniel Stewart, who was a professor at the University of Texas. He was, I believe, 37 years old. He took, I believe, just 9 pills. And his mom gave an interview, at one point about a year ago, talking about his suicide. And she was saying that he had told her, I can't deal with what this medication has done to my body and my mind. He was dealing with penile tissue issues. He was dealing with testicular shrinkage. He was dealing with depression, with anxiety, with these body composition changes. A lot of these classic symptoms of Post Finasteride Syndrome. You have Connell Gold. He was 22 years old. He was a kid when he took his life. And there's more like them. This is real. This isn't a made-up psychosomatic disorder. And until doctors start taking this seriously and putting more research into this, people are going to continue taking their lives. These men right here, these were brothers, these were fathers, these were sons, these were law enforcement officers, these were teachers, these were professors, these were men who had no reason to do what they did. But this medication drove them to do that. Look, I encourage more people to step up and start talking about this issue. Otherwise, more people are probably going to die as a result of this. This isn't a hyperbole. I'm not trying to exaggerate this. You can look up all these men online. This is a real thing. This idea that, people like me are just fear-mongering, right? And we're lying about our symptoms. I have absolutely no incentive for this, right? I just want to get out of this. I want to get my life back. I want to build awareness. And I want to hopefully find at least a viable treatment and hopefully a cure one day. But I recognize that the only way we're going to do this is by coming out and talking about this and being open about our experience. But again, this isn't fear-mongering. So we need to shut that myth down, right? These symptoms exist. This syndrome exists. I think as of now, there are, 58 published studies on Post Finasteride Syndrome. So awareness is picking up, but we need to pick up more momentum at this point. So look, I would highly encourage people to donate to the PFS network. So the PFS network is really an independently run organization that's currently funding research into trying to figure out what the mechanism is behind, Post Finasteride Syndrome. So they actually have a study coming up at the Institute for Human Genetics over there in Germany. I know a few people who are going to be a part of that study. I think they're building off the Baylor study with that too. So let me talk about that real quick, because I do have my note cards right here to remember some of these things. But there was a study released by Baylor back in 2020. I think the study was actually conducted back in 2014. But basically what the Baylor study did, to give a high-level overview, is they compared 25 people who claimed to have post-finasteride syndrome. And I say claimed, right? Because, there's not really a definitive way to prove this as of yet. But 25 people who claim to have post-finasteride syndrome, and they compared them to 25 people, 25, healthy individuals. And what they found was that the people who had post-finasteride syndrome, when compared to the control group, had 1,446 genes that were overexpressed, and then 2,318 genes that were underexpressed. So we know genetically there's something going on there. There's probably been some type of epigenetic shift within our body. I think the leading theory right now is that this has to do with the androgen receptors in the body. Like the androgen receptors have essentially been silenced. Why this only affects a certain number of people, we don't know yet. There must be some type of predisposal that people who have post-finasteride syndrome have, right? And the medication just basically it kicks that off. And that's why I say I want to be objective about this. People can take this medication and be fine. And most are, I think, from my understanding. I do think, again, there are a lot of people who are hiding in the shadows who are too afraid to step up and talk about this because they're embarrassed. Look, I don't want people to be embarrassed, and that's where I'm hoping that this video will help people, will inspire people to step up and start talking about this issue. Because look, the fact is, people do things for cosmetic purposes all the time. People do Botox injections, right, to tighten their skin. People take a collagen supplement to improve their skin. People take pills for acne, right? They take Accutane. Well, that's a whole nother topic of discussion that I can talk about in another video. The point is, people take different things, right, to improve their looks. So with finasteride, you took a pill for some hair loss. You had a very bad adverse reaction to it, and now you're sick, and now you want to get better. There is no stigma, if you ask me, to that. There is no stigma whatsoever. Please, we need to eliminate that. We just want to get better. We want to find a cure for this. We want our lives back. And again, I think the best way, or the quickest way to do that, is by coming out and talking about this issue. So again, I know I sound like a broken record here, but I encourage people to please step up, make videos, come talk to me. If you have any questions for me, you can talk to me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. You can comment on this video. You can send me a message on Facebook. Again, I'm coming out here. I'm stating my name. My name is Mark Millick, and yes, I have post-finasteride syndrome. The PFS network, though, again, they're funding a lot of research right now. This one particular study is being done over there in Germany. I highly, highly encourage people to look into the PFS network. There's, for some reason, this narrative that this is a scam and that the PFS network is really just taking money from people. That couldn't be further from the truth. You can reach out to the president of the network. His name is Mitch. I've talked to him myself. He's very easy to get in touch with. If you have any questions, you can talk to him. You can look up information about the organization online. They have a, I don't know what they call it, the registration number. You can look that up. This is a real organization, and it's really the only thing we have that's currently looking into this issue. So look, again, I encourage people to please donate to the network. They're looking into really trying to figure out what the mechanism is behind post-finasteride syndrome. But there's other ways you can get involved too. You can write letters to different medical organizations. You can make these YouTube videos. You can talk to me. I'd be more than happy to use this as a platform to get people to speak on. So look, we have options here. We are not silent, but this should absolutely piss you off. If you've been dealing with this for any amount of time, you have a right to get your life back. You have a right to be the person that you were before. And we shouldn't just sit here and take it. So I encourage everybody, because right now we have this major division in this community, it seems like, right? You have the Rape Pete forums. You have the Propecia Help forums. There's a lot of negativity in this field, but we need to come together as a whole. So I'm calling everybody from all around to please quit being these armchair scientists, right? There have been people who've been trying to theorize for, at this point, 20 years, trying to figure out what the cause of this is, and we haven't been able to replicate any of these treatments. Some people do respond well to HCG. Other people have had decent responses to different supplements. The fact is, some of the most severe cases, we haven't been able to replicate any type of treatment. There have been, again, people suffering for all this time. So I encourage everyone, let's come together. The best way out of this is by funding research towards real scientists, towards scientists, that are at the top of their field in genetics. And that's what the PFS network is doing right now. Please, I encourage everybody to donate. And if you have any questions for me, you can reach out to me. Again, my name is Mark Millick. You can look me up on Facebook. You can look me up on YouTube. Again, I had a prior channel, Mark Millick Fitness. You can look me up on bodybuilding.com. I'm here to answer questions, though. I'm happy to have a discussion with people. You can comment on this video, and I encourage people to share. But really, thank you so much for watching this, and we got to maintain this hope. So please continue fighting for justice.